Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Springer, JNF CEO. Welcome to the second in our series of JNF Connect webinars. I hope you and your families are all well and have been coping through the last couple of months. Tonight's session will be moderated by Dan Monheit, who we are very fortunate to have on our JNF Victoria board. Dan is the co-founder and strategy director of Hardhat, one of Australia's most innovative creative agencies, and is renowned in the industry for his insights into behavioural economics. He presents to marketing conferences around the world, and his podcast, Bad Decisions, has thousands of followers across more than 50 countries. We have a great expert panel that Dan will shortly introduce, who will all share their insights on building resilience. This is obviously a key issue for the world today, but one that Israel has had to deal with for many years. And as with many other challenges that Israel has unfortunately had to confront, it is becoming a centre of excellence in building resilience, sharing its expertise with other countries. A great example of that expertise is at the Sderot Resilience Centre, which you will hear more about tonight. JNF is very proud to support the centre, which treats children and families with PTSD from rocket attacks, and will be the focus of our main campaign this year. Building a resilient Israel has underpinned JNF's mission since 1901, working through wars, peace, and pandemics to ensure a sustainable Jewish homeland. That effort continues today, with a focus on developing Israel's periphery, particularly in the Negev. This includes desert agriculture that is enabled by JNF-funded R&D, recycled water, and infrastructure, and is now feeding the rest of the country. Thank you all for your many years of partnership with JNF in helping achieve these results, and your ongoing support for our shared mission. I hope you enjoy tonight's session.
Hi everybody, and welcome to JNF Connect, JNF Australia's webinar series. This is an initiative we've put together designed to connect the Australian community with Israel. Thank you for the intro also, Dan. As you mentioned, I'm Dan Monheit, a member of the JNF Victoria board and co-founder of Hardhat. So as I'm sure you all know, tonight's webinar is entitled Mind Shifts, Building Resilience, Changing Mindsets and Achieving Goals. Hopefully that is what you thought you were signing up for tonight. If it is, you're in the right place. Now, this is meant to be a webinar for everyone, whether you're in business, whether you are parenting, whether you are parenting and in business, or you are just a regular person trying to deal with our new reality through COVID-19. Tonight is also going to be, there's a big interactive component of this. So we're going to bring the other panelists on in a minute. I'm going to facilitate some questions, and then we've got a big section where we'd love questions from you guys. And the way we're going to be able to receive those questions is there is a chat facility. Depending on the size of your screen, that chat box is either going to be on the right-hand side or down the bottom. And I can see some of you guys are already in there commenting, saying that it wasn't working, but now things are working, which is great. Can everybody just make sure they can locate the chat box, because that is a place to pop your questions. I would also love to know where you guys are. So if everybody could just go into the chat box and just give us your state, that would be super handy. It would give us some info about where everybody's located, and would also be very reassuring because I'd be able to see that you all know how to use the chat facility. So if you guys could do that, that would be wonderful. Over the course of this evening, if you do have questions for the panel, please pop them in there. If those questions, if you would like them directed at a particular member of the panel, please include that in your question as well so I can channel it accordingly. And I can see a very steady stream of locations coming through, so that is fantastic. Thank you. All right, so for this evening, JNF has rounded up some of the absolute best in the business when it comes to resilience and mindset. And as you are soon to see, each one of our panelists is highly qualified, highly intelligent, highly experienced in their respective fields. And as your moderator this evening, really my main job is just to do my best to stay out of their way. So the topic of resilience is not just timely, but also something really close to our hearts at JNF. As Dan Springer alluded to earlier, with only 15 seconds to run for safety from incoming rockets, it is no wonder that 80% of Sderot children suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And as Dan also mentioned, later this year, our annual campaign will be supporting the Sderot Resilience Centre, it's an incredible place. Lots of wonderful content about that on our site. These guys specialise in animal-assisted therapy for children and teenagers living with PTSD, but you'll hear more about that later. So So of our three panelists, our first is Ayelet Shmuel. She is a psychotherapist at the Sderot Resilience Center and also head of the clinical unit at Ashkelon's Resilience Center. Ayelet was born and raised in Ashkelon, Israel, was an officer in the IDF, and attained her BA from Tel Aviv University. She then moved to the US, and after 18 years of living and developing her career in Denver, Colorado, Ayelet returned to Israel, where today she trains professional and paraprofessional teams in emotional first aid. Many of the techniques Ayelet uses to help our clients living with trauma in Israel's border communities are the exact same strategies that can be applied to children and adults living through the unpredictability of life we're all experiencing today. On the webinar this evening, Ayelet's main jam is going to be around all things resilience. So welcome, Ayelet. Next up, we have Dr. Mel Weinberg. Mel is a psychologist, academic, and research consultant based in Melbourne, Australia. Mel specializes in subjective well-being, resilience, trauma, and sport and performance psychology. Mel has also authored book chapters, scientific journal articles, and research reports, as well as appearing on plenty of TV and radio programs, including the ABC, CNN, all of these things as an expert on the science of happiness. Mel currently works as a sports psychologist in private practice, is a consultant psychologist to clubs in the AFL and A-League, and Director of Academic Studies for the Institute for Social Neuroscience. She is also my co-host on our shared podcast, Bad Decisions, where we talk about the intersection of marketing and psychology. Tonight, Mel will be talking about changing mindsets, unless she changes her mind, which I've been told she's very, very good at doing. And finally, from Ra'anana, Israel, please welcome Andy Saltowitz. She's a professional development strategist and mindset master coach. She's a certified professional life coach from the esteemed Adler Institute, a member of the International Coaching Federation, a global Lumina practitioner and master NLP practitioner. She's also the creator of the Rise and Shine Personal Development Journal, which is available worldwide. Andy is currently furthering her expertise in the science of well-being, and tonight will be bringing her experience around achieving goals, even when, or especially when, life doesn't go exactly as we had planned. So we're going to start with each of our panelists talking a little about their allocated areas, followed by more of a general discussion between the group, and a good chunk of questions from the audience. So please get involved, use that comments box where we can. So I just want to make sure all my other panelists are here with their cameras on. That is much better. Hey, look at that, just like magic. Because I was like, this is going to be a very long hour if I'm going to subjective well-being, resilience, and goal setting all by myself, and people are definitely going to get sick of hearing from me. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right. So we are going to kick things off with building resilience. So please welcome all the way from Ashkelon, Ayelet Shmuel. We just pause for applause. I'm sure people are applauding in their homes. We're applauding on the panel. That is excellent. Okay. So we're starting with building resilience. Could you, Ayelet, tell us just a little bit about the work you do at the Resilience Center, really from a broad perspective?
So I think when we talk about Sderot is kind of a big name, right? When it comes to the Gaza envelope. But when we're dealing with resiliency, we are really actually, when you measure resiliency, let's say that, you measure it within the community. So the community component to a resiliency is one of the biggest things. So when you look at the Sderot Resiliency Center, what we do is, yes, we have psychotherapy, we have animal therapy, we work with teenagers, and we work with families. And that's the therapy section of it. So we have a clinical unit. That's one leg that we stand on. The other leg is we do a lot of outreach. So we're trying to do preventative work and not just reactive work, right? So it's not just when rockets are flying that we go out there to the community and we work with the community. It's also when we have that moment, if you can call it that, that routine, emergency routine is what we call it in Israel, where we can actually breathe. And then we do outreach. We go out to staff members. We go out to schools. We go out wherever we can and really bring the knowledge and give some practical tools to what do you do and how do you handle stress? Because when you look at Sderot as a whole, stress is not something that is going down really. I mean, we have peaks of it during rocket attacks, but for the most part, we got the peaks and then we go back, but we never go back to zero. the systems are always activated over there. So it's super important that the treatment leg and the community leg, the outreach training is going to be standing really, really well. And the other one is really working with the city itself. So think about it, that everyone within Sderot is really putting everything they have in order to keep this community going. So you don't just have members of the community. Everyone is somewhat of a leader somewhere, either in their families or in their schools or in this hat or that hat. So really what we're trying to do is kind of keep that little network going and give as many tools as possible and be there for peaks of the anxiety peaks, stress peaks, whatever you want to call it. And then when it comes down, really do some groundwork. So we do interventions, therapy, really, that's kind of how it looks.
Amazing. I look forward to getting into that in a little bit more detail later on this evening. Can I just maybe ask you one more question before we move on, which is around the emotional first aid kit? It's something that I know something that you work on quite closely. And just for somebody that has never experienced this, could you just tell us a little bit about what that is?
You're talking about the one that we actually give in Sderot?
Yeah.
So one of the things that the Resilience Center did is they said, okay, what would be a good intervention tool or a good intervention when we have rockets? Let's say I'm home, I have 5 kids with me, nobody can leave the house, rockets are flying, I have 15 seconds to run to the shelter, blah, blah, blah. How do I actually get the kids' emotions under control? How do I engage with my kids? How do I do an intervention when I'm home alone, right? So what we did is we developed a kit that really goes hand in hand with the intervention tools that we use. So if we talk about breathing methods, we give them little bubbles, right? Like all these, because what it does is it works on breathing, but the kids don't find it boring. They're not going to sit there and do this when the rocket attacks, but they will chase bubbles. We give them mandalas to color because coloring works on the model of basic PH. Basic PH talks about how do you work on emotions while somebody is really having a hard time. So that's a channel drawing. So what we did is we put in that little kit, it's really cute, it looks like a lunchbox, all these little things that you could do, even dough, stuff like that, and hoping and teaching parents in our trainings how to use it and what to do with it.
Amazing. All right, thank you. We're gonna get back into some more later on in the show. But what I want to do, I want to keep things moving. I want to move across to Andy now. And Andy, obviously your main jam, your expertise is all around goal setting. And I guess my first question for you, it might be an obvious one, but it feels like is, you know, why goal setting is important, and really, are there parts of our lives that maybe should or shouldn't be goal oriented? You know, we should be setting goals for everything, or how do you think about that?
So yeah, I think that innately as human beings, we are goal directed. So that means we are constantly intrinsically behaving towards something. So it is very important to set up a goal-directed life, because if you don't have something to strive for, then you can't live with intention and purpose and focus, and you certainly can't create or design a life for yourself with meaningful markers and milestones, because you're going to be pretty aimless. And so we do need goals to help charge us and engage us and keep us on path and focused. But like you said, it is really about a balance between being and doing. And I would say that we have to master this dance between being present and mindful and accepting of whatever is going on in our life right now, not constantly moving, just being, and at the same time doing. So it is this dance or this balance between being and doing. But we certainly do need goals. We are wired to grow.
All right, thank you. And I guess something like coaching, I imagine a lot of people have not actually experienced, maybe not as growing up, maybe not as capacity. So I just wondering if you could give us a particular view of what coaching is about, and what sorts of kind of normal everyday people with in a coaching sense.
Okay, so wow. So it's, if you can take the metaphor from sport, if you can imagine a coach sitting on the sidelines and the players actually doing the work, that is a coaching relationship. So coaching is a very focused process. It's a relationship between a coach and a client that is designed and aimed for improving and enhancing performance and generating maximum results for the client. So the client is actually empowered through the coaching process and the relationship to unleash incredible potential and change mindsets and really set themselves up for success. So the coach ultimately knows that the client is the expert at his or her own life. And as the coach, I provide the tools and the strategies and the game plan, so to speak, so that the client can achieve his or her best.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Great description. And again, we're going to get into some more of that a little bit later. But I also now want to turn to Dr. Mel, my lovely co-host. And so good to have you joining us this evening tonight as well. So Mel, obviously you're here to talk about changing mindset. I know that's something you spend a lot of your professional and personal life thinking about and talking about. I guess for everybody that hasn't had the pleasure of hearing us talk before, I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about sort of in your context, in the context of your role as a psychologist, working with elite athletes, people with cancer, and also just regular normal people. How important is mindset when it comes to well-being and resilience?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Obviously, I'm going to say that mindset is very important to people's well-being and resilience.
Good.
But I think when I think about it, the first part of where I usually start in terms of changing mindsets or thinking about mindsets, the first thing I like to do is to change everybody's mindset so that they think about these things in the same way that I do. Right, it means we can all start working from a much better point. So, so when I talk about well-being and when I talk about resilience, the way that I think about it and the way that I understand happiness is a little bit different, perhaps to what most people are used to. I often talk about there being two types of happiness. So the first type of happiness is the type we're all familiar with. It's an emotional reaction to something pleasant that happens, but that sort of usually fades after whatever is making us happy in that moment is removed. And what's left is the more underlying sense of contentment and satisfaction. That's sort of the point that we go back to when there's nothing else really pressing at the time. Now, in the context of this understanding, people are going to feel all sorts of different things. They might feel happy at times. They might feel sad at times. They might feel angry, frustrated, fearful, confused, excited, all these sorts of things. And in that context, your resilience is your ability to navigate all of those different emotions and work your way back to that default level of just contentment. So it's important, I think, for people when I start working with them that they understand that they need to first have an understanding and they need to first shift their mindset around what it actually means to be happy and what it means to be resilient and what it means to be well. And from there, we've got a point to work.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is we might think that happiness is that fleeting moment of joy, but actually what you're talking about is when that all dissipates, what is your underlying kind of base level and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, you can sort of think of it like the climate. You know, you can do this analogy to temperature that whatever's underlying is like the climate. So, we're fortunate enough, or I'm fortunate enough to live in Australia here, and the climate is usually pretty nice. That said, we have different seasons. And the weather changes with that. And then even in summer, we might have a really rainy day. And that's sort of that happy response, that sort of temporary, emotional, short-term bit. But what we're doing is looking at overall, whether it rains, whether it's sunny, whether it's stormy, any of that. Ultimately, the happiness that I'm talking about is the overriding climate that's there, guiding everything else that we do.
All right. Interesting. And in the work that you do, and I guess I don't know if it's a process that you take your clients through, you're obviously working with people at very different ends of a spectrum where you've got elite athletes in there, probably experiencing some of the best or worst parts of their life. You've got people and their families who are dealing with cancer and sort of everything in between. Is it a similar process, similar challenges? Like, do you find yourself having similar conversations with people wherever they're at? Is it a universal challenges, or are there things that are really specific to the different audiences you work with?
Look, yes, I work fundamentally with high-performing people in sport and performance, but I also, the people that I work with through the oncology work that I do, people with cancer are also usually very high-performing. We're all high performers in everything that we do day to day, and we all encounter challenges along the way as well. I think fundamentally, whether you're an elite athlete or whether you're a person with cancer or whether you're an elite athlete who has cancer, before all of that, you're human. And so the process underlying all of that are very similar. And I often do find that I get the same sorts of themes come up in conversations with clients, whether it's a person with cancer who might be grieving the loss of the life that they thought they had or the loss of their health, or whether it's an elite athlete who may have suffered an injury and is also grieving the loss of what they do day to day in their experience and their sense of identity. So there's a lot of commonalities that do come through, yeah.
Okay, super interesting. All right, guys, so what I want to do now that we've all had a little chance to introduce and get a sense of the different flavor or perspectives that each of us bring, I've just got a handful of questions I'd love to throw to the group. And I don't know if we're going to do hands up or you guys will just jump in and we'll fight it out. I guess the first thing, you guys all work in practices where you're dealing with lots of different people day to day. And when I think about the current situation we're in, we have all been plunged almost without warning into greater levels of uncertainty than most of us have ever experienced before. And then to compound matters, we're also experiencing unprecedented levels of social isolation, giving us lots and lots of time to ponder all of that uncertainty by ourselves. And I guess I'm wondering, what have you guys seen as far as the short-term immediate impacts of the current situation? Like in the clientele you're dealing with day to day, have all the conversations changed, or is everything just kind of business as usual? Andy, do you want to go first?
Okay, so that's a really good point. And I've noticed a really interesting range from clients who have absolutely become paralyzed and frozen almost over the pandemic in terms of fear, in terms of financial stress, health concerns for loved ones, elderly parents, cancellation of big plans and projects. So you see that end of the pandemic, and I call that the negademic because there is so much negativity going on around that. And then you see the other side where people are hyper productive. You see incredible creativity and innovation and pivots that people are making personally and professionally during this time. Loads and loads of creativity, and that's where the resilience is really shining. And in the corporate world as well, when I work with teams and corporate clients and business leaders, you really see the adaptive leadership start to emerge as well. So I guess it ranges from this real negative fear, anxiety-based feeling of stuckness and confusion and deep complex uncertainty, all the way to people being super innovative, super creative, and super productive. And then there's the positive twist of just, you know, in the short term, like you say, families are at home together, sometimes for the first time ever, all contained, husbands and wives, partners, children, all spending time indoors together, just enjoying this closeness, which brings up a lot of, you know, hugely positive aspects and a lot of, as well, difficult, complicated aspects as well. And then the positive side in terms of, you know, what this has done for the atmosphere and the environment and the world. So I guess you see a really broad range going from the really difficult to people who really leveraging whatever they can to create pockets of control and be super innovative and make some meaningful pivots.
Sorry, don't know what happened there. And so, Ayala, what about you? Obviously, for people dealing with imminent threats of terror attacks, I don't know, is this a big, meaningful difference, or is this just like another thing to worry about in my regular day-to-day stressful life? Also, everybody went mute for a sec.
I'm trying to be good, you know.
Thank you.
My microphone on silent. So I just want to say something. We see different kind of reactions, right? And think about it this way. Some people became super productive right? I saw, for example, in my family, my brother, he is building things and doing stuff and outdoor kitchens and all that stuff. I mean, you give him one more week of this and he's digging a tunnel, all the way back to Gaza. I mean, he has too much time on his hand and he's productive. You have other people that are super stuck. What we are seeing really that you have to measure people through their baseline. This is kind of how we measure anxiety anyway. So if someone is usually, most people didn't stay the same. They either went hyperproductive or completely shut down. The ones that are in the middle are kind of wandering and they're kind of flying from one day is okay, the next one is not so much. It's to be expected. We're used to it from, every about a month and a half, we're kind of shut down. So this is not new to the Gaza envelope. It's not new to stay at home. It's not new to your businesses are shut down. You can't leave the house. You're stuck with your kids. The educational system is not working. Kids are not going to school. And you have that kind of and not to mention, it's scary. It's scary when rockets are flying. It's even scarier when you hear the IDF bombing. I mean, you're right there. It's barely 2 miles, 3 miles on your doorstep. So the noises are super scary. So these people are used to it. So for the first week, in Sderot, it was business as usual. Also in Ashkelon, we're used to this. When it turned into a longer stretch, then you see different kind of things coming up, right? Then we kind of started seeing, okay, well, now what? Because we're not hearing it with bombs. We're not hearing it the way we're used to hearing it, but we're still stuck at home. Now, the levels of resiliency is really the ability to be flexible, the ability to bounce back, the ability to adapt to all these new situations. And what we are teaching people, and that's when skills, I think, in the South kind of came handy, is when people they know you have to map the things that you can control versus the things that you cannot control. I don't know when Hamas is going to throw rockets. I don't know when, I don't know how many, and I don't know for how long. I do know that when I'm sitting next to a bomb shelter, I can be happy or sad. I can be eating and cooking, or I can be very miserable. I can choose. I mean, we're trying to map the variables that we can control. Bringing back control, bringing back some kind of cognitive aspect to all this limbic craziness, that's our tool. So when we work in Sderot, and we saw it kind of fluctuating between people, and some people did get re-traumatized. It brought up everything for them. It felt like a war zone. So we can go either way with this, and it's super personal, I think. But they definitely felt that the first week they could handle it, and after that it was just a little more difficult because people feel like this is a war zone. And I have to tell you that right now the feel is that we are 5 seconds away from another round, because everybody, the notion on the street is the minute this virus thing is a non-issue, we're going to get rockets again. So for the Sderot people, we're going to open up everything and then we're going to get shut down again. So that anxiety, I think that's starting to come up, and you can feel it. You can see it.
Wow. And it's just so interesting to think that they're almost two opposite ends of the spectrum as far as things that can cause anxiety, because one of them is so visceral and so apparent. It is loud. You can see it. You can hear it. You can feel the jets flying over you. And the other thing is just like this invisible ghost that you can't see it. You can't touch it. You don't know where it is. You just have to be scared of everything.
You can't see the bear. Think about it from an anxiety point of view. When we talk about rockets to kids, for example, or to parents, we talk about the fact that if you walk in a forest, you see a bear, and then the physical aspect of it starts, right? Your heart is pounding, and you're shaking, and you can cry. You have all these responses, right? And your breathing is shallow, all that stuff. But with the coronavirus, there is a bear, you just can't see it. Yeah. And you don't know where the bear is. So it's trickier, and you have to kind of live comfortably with the fact that the bear is right next to you, and you don't know when he's going to bite. Yeah. So there's something very different when it comes to that. You don't have that craziness of, oh my gosh, there's a siren, we have to start this thing all over again, right? But for the most part, those stresses are something that we are just so very familiar with, unfortunately. Yeah.
And I'm sorry to hear that. Mel, let me kick it to you. So we're just talking about what the immediate impact sort of in your day-to-day consults with clients has been in the last, call it 8 weeks since this coronavirus thing has really set in? Is it business as usual, or are you seeing major differences?
I think it's really interesting to compare maybe what Ayelet's saying about what she sees in what sounds like a community who are so, in a way, they're so used to uncertainty. Whereas in Australia, we have a completely different tolerance for uncertainty. And I think it's really interesting to what she was saying, that there was, because they're so used to living in uncertainty in some ways, this is different in a way. What I found with my clients is that when we initially went into lockdown, this was really hard. We're so used to having freedom in Australia to do what we want to do. We don't, we can live our life the way that we want, do the things that we want to do. We also have predictability and we have familiarity. We know what's going to happen next. So we're sort of fortunate that we don't really have that much uncertainty that we live with day to day. And so when this first all started and when we all first went into lockdown, this caused a lot of trouble and a lot of anxiety, a lot of change for a lot of people that we didn't like. Now that we're sort of 6-8 weeks into it, people have adjusted. People thought this would be really bad a lot of the time initially, but people don't seem to consider how resilient we actually are in terms of dealing with change. What I'm now starting to find, as in Australia, in Melbourne, the restrictions start to ease just a little bit, is that people start to build up the anxiety again, sort of like what Ayelet was saying, but it seems almost, silly to talk about it in Australia, given what, given the sorts of things they're dealing with there. But it's the same sorts of patterns, that there's an initial sort of shock, then people get used to the change and that becomes the new normal. And then there's the threat of new change, more change coming, which introduces further uncertainty. And the idea here that we're not going back to a normal that's the same normal that we used to know. So we still don't quite know what we're going out into. And so with any of that just introduces more uncertainty, and uncertainty just brings anxiety.
So I tell you what, I mean, it's really tempting to dive further into this current situation, but I'm conscious I don't want to burn the whole time we've got talking about it, because the things you guys work on are far more relevant than just to the current situation. So I want to just deliberately broaden out a little bit, and maybe this is a good segue from what Mel was saying. You guys get to work with people in some of the most introspective and most transformative parts of their lives. In your experience, what is the thing that most people just don't understand about themselves? So Mel, I know you were just, I guess, dancing around the idea that perhaps we are better at dealing with uncertainty than we might appreciate. Is that the thing that, God, if I could just get people to understand one thing about themselves, this is what it would be?
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think that people, like I sort of said, people tend to underestimate their own resilience in these circumstances. We underestimate how quickly and how well we actually do adapt. One of the things, I guess, that I find that people don't seem to understand is sometimes they'll come to me and they'll be struggling. That's usually the reason they come to me. But part of what they say is that they don't feel like they're resilient. They don't feel like they're resilient. They thought they were resilient, but they're feeling sad, they're feeling down, they're feeling anxious. So that must mean that they're not resilient. And that's where I sort of, in terms of changing people's mindsets, I feel like that's part of the process of being resilient. Part of the process for me of being resilient is being vulnerable as well, is being affected by things that happen, being human, if you're just going along doing everything normal when bad things happen, that doesn't demonstrate resilience to me. That demonstrates a lack of, it's robotic, So I think that in order to be resilient, what first needs to happen is that you first need to be vulnerable. You first need to feel, you need to experience sadness, loss, grief, anger, fear, all of these things. And resilience is about how you come through that, not the absence of that.
Interesting. Andy, what about you in your practice? What do you think is the thing that most people just don't understand about themselves?
I'm completely in alignment with Mel on this, in terms of just getting that perspective, validating really complicated feelings and just sitting with them a little bit is very, very important to any change process. Even when clients come for coaching, when there's no global pandemic in the world, change is hard. Any change is hard, and it requires a level level of courage and bravery and honesty with ourselves. And moving through any transformation is going to come with a lot of difficult emotions, because you're stepping out of what is safe and familiar and comfortable into an unknown realm. And that requires, first and foremost, just getting some perspective in terms of these complicated feelings and validating them, really owning them and feeling them. And once you've done that, then you can do some kind of new, almost a reality check, where you can set yourself some new measurements and some new markers. You know, I said to my clients, we've got to change our measurements right now, because if you are measuring your productivity on pre-COVID, what a regular day would look like 9 weeks ago, you can't have those same measurements today and have those same expectations, because you're going to be so frustrated and so disappointed. So we've got to also be aware of how we feel and really be true to those emotions, and then use that as a platform to launch some new markers and some new measurements for progress and success, so that you're not using old markers which are really not relevant today when the circumstances are so different.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And Ayala, what about you?
Well, I want to say that
we disagree with the other two. Let's get it.
I think, well, what I want to say is a few things. In Sderot, or in the Gaza envelope, we have a strength-based approach, meaning we are going for people's strengths. We're mapping it immediately, trying to figure out what this person has, what is his personal capital that we can work with, and that's where we go for, because we are trying to promote post-traumatic growth and not post-traumatic stress. We are moving away from post-traumatic stress disorder, which also, if you ask me personally, it is not the right disorder, okay, to give to people that are living under ongoing trauma. It is not post-trauma. We are in these traumatic events all the time. So you can't give post-traumatic stress disorder to people that are living under trauma, under events constantly. So we're moving away from that approach. We're going for the growth, because resiliency is to take the traumatic event, change the perspective, to find the strength, and to find that adaptability, that little piece that you can switch your perception. That is what we do. And that's why I relate to these ladies, because what they're talking about is changing the mindset, changing the way you see. We're not changing the events. In Ashkelon, we have 100 rockets sometimes. 100 rockets or 50 rockets per day. That means you do not leave the house. And it is very scary, because the Iron Dome is not going to intercept all of them. But I have to tell you that if your perception shifts, if the way you see how you went through this event shifts, the event stays the same. But your mindset is different, and you are on the other side of it. So we are going constantly for that. And I have to say, the one factor that I find working in the field that changes everything, when you say what people don't know about themselves, people need more psychoeducation. They don't understand how their body takes stress. They don't understand, so they start freaking out because their heart is pounding, or they don't feel that they have enough air. The minute you give them some psychoeducation, the minute you explain to them what's actually happening, you normalize it, then they're like, okay, all right, so it's going to be like this for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Nobody's shaking for 3 days straight. When you put that in that perspective, you get yourself a little bit of a shift. Or when you tell people, hey, why don't you measure how dangerous this is versus how scared you feel. If I tell a kid, hey, how scary is it? A kid that I was on the phone with last time we had rockets in February, 9-year-old, how scared are you? He's like, I'm really scared. 0 to 10, 11, great. How dangerous is it? And he was like, what? How dangerous is it? Are you home? Yes. Are your parents with you? Yes. Is Iron Dome working? Yes. Is the IDF working? Yes. Are you in a bomb shelter? Yes. So how dangerous is it? 5. Okay. That's kind of how we work.
Nice. Right. Guys, I want to I have so many more questions that I want to ask, but that would be unkind of me because we've got some amazing questions coming through. So I'm just going to start firing these off, and let's see. We don't have to fly through them, but I want to see if we can get through a bunch of them. So let's see what we can do. So the first one is from Gabby in Sydney. Hi, Gabby. Thanks for your question. This one's directed specifically at Ayelet. She says, what are some key strategies that the world can learn from Sderot and Israel about managing stress? How are you using animals to assist children with trauma and stress? So key things the world can learn from Israel, and what are you doing with animals?
Okay, so there are a few things here. So the animals center that we have is pretty much based on research that talks about the fact that basic research is if you touch an animal and you start petting it, your heart rate is dropping, for example, right? That's the number one research there. But what they talk about is when you start taking care of animals, think about the extra effect that it brings, right? Now, I'm not mentioning just the hugs and the warmth and all that. You get responsibilities. You have a sense of success. You have a sense of control. You have a sense that you have something that you know how to do. So we promote success, little successes, small successes, right? And we also give kids the feeling that they are in control of something. Once that happens, think about their value or their confidence kind of going up. And now thinking, okay, then I guess I can do things. That is a part of what we do with the animal center, right? So that's one. The other part of the question was how basic tools, right?
Yeah, I mean, what can the rest of the world learn? What would be your top one thing that the rest of the world can learn from the people over there?
I think first it depends on where you're at. I always tell people, figure out if you're in the middle of an intervention or treatment. Those are two different things. If you're talking about tools, usually people talk about interventions. I mean, it's good when the peak is up, when people are really stressed out. So when that happens, first go for the physical. Understand that your cortisol levels and adrenaline levels are high. When that happens, understand what's happening in your body. So one, psychoeducate people. Psychoeducate your kids. Kids are awesome. They understand it. Take a doll, explain it to them. Your heart rate is going, this is happening. Then give your body a feedback. Okay, an indication, the opposite one, meaning if my mouth is dry because I'm scared, well, put a gum in. If my digestive system is going to lock in because I'm stressed and I'm scared, eat something. If I'm going to, right, if my adrenaline level is high and I'm shaking, well, shake your hand even more. Let that excess energy out of your body. Don't do this and try to relax. It doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So there are, I say go for the psychophysical. Psychophysical means psychoeducate. Go for the body, and then start giving some cognitive simple tasks. Why don't you put the red things on the shelf and the yellow ones on the other side? That's cognitive. Use anything that has to do with organization stuff. That gives control back and makes sure that this frontal lobe is actually working and the limbic system can calm down a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. We've got a bit of a flurry of questions here all around a similar topic, which is basically we're parents, myself included. We're trying to work. We're trying to educate our kids. We're anxious. We don't want our kids to know we're anxious. The kids have been painful, but then they're going to go back to school and maybe they're going to resent going back to school because they've had it so good because they've been with their parents for so long. If I could look to each of you guys for maybe something kind of overarching about what parents dealing with their whole world basically falling on top of them in their house, like what are things we can do to keep ourselves in check, keep our families in check, and try and maintain some sort of professionalism as well. Maybe Andy, we can start with you, and then I'll kick it to you, Mel.
So I think the first thing is the physical aspect in terms of the kids' needs and our needs as parents. So I think to make sure that our kids' physical needs are met and their safety needs are met in terms of, you know, my kids know that they can't go out now, even though the restrictions have been lifted here, without a mask or without gloves or alcohol. They understand the 2-meter distancing and what that means. So we really do have very open conversation around the physical safety element. And I think that's really important, rather than just loading off all these rules and instructions on the kids, to actually have an open, honest conversation around it. So I think the physical safety of our kids is obviously the most important, as well as looking after ourselves. And I think the second thing is structure. Even though everything seems all over the place and everything seems like absolute turmoil, there can absolutely still be pockets of control and a framework in which to thrive even in lockdown, even at home. So if you can create some kind of a structure where you still set an alarm, you still get dressed in the morning, even though you could easily work in PJs all day long, get up, get dressed, have breakfast, show up, keep to a good routine in terms of bedtime, in terms of eating wholesome foods. It's so easy to say, oh, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I haven't had anything to eat. I'll have 3 tubs of ice cream. You know, it's so easy to just let everything go. And I think if you, well, I think if you can create some kind of a structure or framework where you set an alarm, you get up, you get dressed, you know that your online schooling is a certain amount of hours, you know you can block off some time for work, and really to still implement a little bit of structure and routine and predictability, even amidst all the chaos. And I think it's also important to still do things that charge you. So to still work out, to still meditate, to still journal if that's what you do, to still have some fun, be creative, bake, do art, do fun things at home, just so that the whole experience is not a lockdown experience, but it is, the mindset shift is we are safe at home experience. And that creates an entirely different emotional reaction as well.
It's a nice reframe. Mel, what about you? So my whole life's fallen in a heap. I'm anxious. What's the best advice you can give?
Well, and let's put this into context of also being a parent and how you can help your children in this way, because I think that a lot of people will spend a lot of energy trying to protect their children from seeing them as anxious and as scared and as stressed as they really are. And that's really hard, okay? It might even make it worse for you. Maybe instead what we do, we're about to be, you know, as restrictions get eased, or maybe even as they don't, we're in a unique position where we're actually really able to be attuned with and understand what kids are feeling at the moment. Your kid says to you, Dad, I'm scared. Sit with him and say, mate, I'm scared too. And this is what I do. This is how I feel when I'm scared. And this is what sometimes helps me to not feel so scared anymore. You know, I'm feeling sad. I miss my friends. You know, have those conversations with them and relate to them in that way, and use it as a conversation to teach them how to work with difficult emotions. It's not the first time that they will feel scared, and it's certainly not going to be the last. So I think as a parent, instead of trying to protect them from bad, let's actually help them work through it. That's what my advice would be.
Amazing. Very practical, very sound advice. Thank you, Mel. I have a question here. It's a great question, and it's in a slightly different arena. The question is more in the corporate sense. So it says, what advice do you have for people in workplaces who need to build resilience for adapting to new technologies quickly? So I guess in the working world, a lot of us have been thrown into working from home, never used Zoom. We've never had to, use remote desktoping into servers and things. It can be pretty hard and pretty overwhelming. And maybe a lot of people who have been very competent and very high achievers at work are thrown into a whole world of unknown. Who would like to start me off with some tips for what we can do here?
I think I want to
Go on, Ayala.
I want to say something, and I think it relates also to the last question, is the idea of acceptance. Acceptance is key. We are in an uncertain time. Some people know how to use technology, some don't. Some people have different connections. People have different connections with their kids and their families. Some had a really good time with the coronavirus at home, some didn't. Acceptance is key. We are going into these shifts right now, and the regulations that keep on shifting and changing every minute of the day. And we're going to go thinking that we know, and we're going home, and we're going to have 12 people working at this hour, at this time. Well, we're bound to fail. If we are going to go into it understanding, just accepting the fact that things are not going to be 100%. Kind of like parenting. If you got this 80% of the time, you're good. If you think that in parenting you can do 100%, then you are missing something, buddy, or you're raising robots. You might check where the battery is. Okay? So I just think that when we're going into it, it doesn't matter if it's an organization or not, you want to look at the parallel process. If a parent is put together and has this acceptance, the kid is not going to be as stressed out. If they're going to mirror each other, if a head of an organization is going to understand that acceptance, and is okay to work with uncertainty, then workers are going to be able to bring that to the table. The parallel process works no matter where you go. That is the rationale. So whatever it is that you want to bring to the table, however it is that you're going to dish it out, is what you're going to get back. Kids, organization, as a manager, I want to say one thing about kids because it's coming up for a lot of people. Please pay attention. You're going to see a lot of dysregulated kids. Emotional dysregulation means that buttons are going to go from 0 to 100. People are going to be more irritable. Kids are going to be more irritable. They're going to go back to see their friends. They don't know socially how they're going to do. It's not an easy time. If you're going to come with empathy, you got this. If you're going to come with judgment, you're going to lose the ability to actually connect and really take this and turn it into growth. Is what I'm saying.
I guess it's challenging because a lot of us might be feeling like we're at our wits' end as well, and that is, a hard time to be compassionate and empathetic. But I guess what you're saying is that's what our kids need from us the most.
And compassion to self. Dan, that's what I'm saying. You have to be compassionate first to yourself, then to them. If you can do that for you and say, you know what, today I was not 100%. Today was not great, but you know what, it's okay. You'll be able to actually take the level of anxiety down. So it's not just to others. You start with self, and then you can go.
Yeah, and I tell you, I'm not raising robots, but sometimes it feels like I'm raising 2 iPads. It happens. Andy or Mel, do either of you guys have anything just on the corporate life, adapting to new technologies, in real time and dealing with all the anxiety and stress that might go with that? Mel, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, before when Ayala was speaking, I was going to say when she was talking about acceptance, I was going to say add on compassion, add on self-compassion, and then and so we got there in the end. But I think I think that there's a point where you have to say to yourself, good enough is good enough. And at the moment, a good enough for many people is way more than good enough. And needing to activate that little cheerleader in your head that says, you got this, you're doing a good job. You're doing the best job that you can. I think sometimes that cheerleader is always there, but sometimes we're not hearing them loud enough. And so being able to turn up the volume on that when we lie in bed at night and go, you know what, G had some tech issues today, but like I did the best I could. That's self-compassion, just cutting yourself some slack and going, yeah, I did all right. Wasn't my best, but I did a pretty good job. Good on me. That's all it takes.
Yeah. I'm going to call you if I'm having a bad day. You can tell me I did a good job.
I'll be your cheerleader.
Thank you. Andy, anything else from you?
I would just maybe add that even though if just to refer to the corporate element in terms of, I do a lot of team coaching, and what's coming up for me is this physical distancing and teams having to work virtually when they used to working very much together in open spaces, in very dynamic, fun, engaging environments. I think now more than ever is a time for more heightened connection in the corporate world. So it's not, well, everyone's at home, everyone's doing their thing, but it's actually a time to make more of an effort and have greater connection, more engagement, more communication. There's no such thing as over communicating today. So I think it's true for leaders, for managers, and for teams. Even though we may be physically separated at the moment, there has never been a greater time to really zoom in on that closeness and that emotional connection right now, because everybody is feeling it, even if it's highly subjective. Everybody is in the same situation with a lot of compassion and patience and a bit of humor in terms of I've had a client whose dog jumped onto his lap in the middle of our coaching call, and it was really funny. And sometimes you've just got to also find the humor amidst the difficulty, amidst the frustration, and also relating back to the parenting with this whole Zoom thing that you said. Our schools were not equipped to go online overnight. It's been very difficult. And although it's now been 9 weeks and there is some kind of a flow, I think from a parenting perspective, we are not homeschooling our children. They're just having online learning, and we have to remove this pressure from ourselves to be these flawless professionals, full-time moms. Now we're all educators as well and full-time teachers. I think we've just got to cut ourselves a little bit of slack and just, like you just said, as long as we're making progress and as long as it's been good enough. No one's aiming for perfection. We're not meant to nail this. We've never done this before.
Instagram has been lying to me this whole time. Guys, we've got about 3 minutes left. I want to do a lightning round. I got one last question for each of you, and then we're going to let everybody get on with their evenings. But I feel like this is literally the dream panel that we could pull together for this question, because I guess I want to know, drawing on your wealth of experience, years of research and study and client consultations, what is the one easiest thing that the 100+ people that are on this webinar right now, what is the easiest thing that any one of us could do right now to improve our overall outlook or resilience or well-being? Who wants to go first? Andy's up first.
I think the easiest thing that every single person can do is track daily wins. Find a tiny win, no matter how small it is, one thing that you are proud of, one thing that you loved about your day, one thing that you are grateful for. You don't have to get it from anywhere outside of you. It's just a reflective moment where you can end off every single day choosing one thing, just one thing to say, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so proud of this. I really love this moment about my day. And even if the rest was total disaster, you can still track daily wins. And the neuroscience really shows how gratitude and tracking daily wins rewires your brain. So it's something we can all do, and it's really accessible to everyone.
Love it. And it's free. What else have we
And
got?
it's free.
Who's up next?
Sure, I'll go.
Cool.
2 little tips. 1, move your body. Make sure your body is moving, especially anything that has to do about vagal tone. If you don't know what it is, go and search on Google, vagal tone. Stretch it and make sure that you are actually activating it. So that's 1. The second, because it will reduce anxiety. The second thing would be find the things that you can control. Find the things that you can actually work with and that are measurable, and then focus on them. That will get your cognitive brain going, and the anxiety piece will be reduced.
Amazing. Awesome. And Mel?
I would say everybody's already done it here today, and I would say connect. One of the things that we know about the way that people respond after difficult events is that people tend to have a stronger sense of community. People band together and people feel more connected. So even though at the moment we might be physically distanced from each other, there's an argument that we can be more connected as a community to every other person in the world than ever before, because we're all going through the same thing. So for me, it would be connect to your community, whether that's the immediate people within your house or whether it's more broader, like coming onto a webinar like this and thinking and sharing time and space with other people. That's what I would say.
Amazing. Fantastic answers, guys. Thank you. So just to recap, the single easiest thing, well, the 4 easiest things that anyone can do for the instant uplift in their outlook, their resilience, their well-being: record those small wins, move your body, think and focus on the things that you can control, and connect. So maybe everybody go for a little walk around your house when this is finished, and you'll have knocked off at least 2 of these today. I'd like to thank the 3 of you for joining us so much. This has been a really interesting, wonderful, many different perspectives, and also some incredible consistencies in what you guys are saying. So it's been amazing to have you all here. Thank you so much for your time. And to all of our guests who have tuned in, listened and watched and submitted some wonderful questions through, thank you guys so much for attending tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to host. So have a great evening, everybody, and we'll see you at the next one.